Okay. Cool. I think we should be good to go. We'll just let people. And by the way, with the questions, you feel free to answer as honest or anything like that, obviously. So if you're
Yeah.
sharing particular information.
I assume we're just going in order.
Yeah, just gonna go in order. So. Okay. Cool.
Let me pull up the stream here.
Have you noticed everyone still wearing giant coats out here though, when it's not even that cold out yet?
I haven't really seen people wearing like massive coats, but I've seen people wearing coats before. Yeah.
Dude, I had a dude, like, I don't know, he's probably in his 40s or something like that, and he sits next to me on the train. Like, there's a couple other spots available, right? But no, he just sits next to me. He's got this giant, like, those marshmallow winter coats. Just has one of those on, and I just all of a sudden just like pushed into the side, and I'm just like, yeah, this is exactly what I like being on the train in Tokyo. Yeah, this is perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I went to like a stand-up show in Osaka because I was in Osaka 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah.
And the seats were literally like half the size of a normal seat.
Oh jeez.
It was not good.
Was it like one of those old like theater rooms or something like that, or was it like?
No, it wasn't that old. It was just a typical like Japanese sized theater.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I've definitely had that though, where it's like you go and like either it's one of two things: either the seat is too narrow, or the leg room in front of you is like nothing. It's like absolutely nothing. You're just like, oh my gosh, seriously, what the heck is going on right now, guys? We know this isn't made for us per se, but have a little extra room if you don't mind. It'd be extremely nice. I see people are trying to come in now. Let me chat text back. This. There we go. All right, what's going on, guys? What's going on? What's going on? If you guys can obviously see from the title, we have some brand new merch available. So make sure you guys hit the exclamation point merch if you want to get the link and everything like that, or if you've seen it over on Twitter and everything. It is limited. It's limited. It's only going until tomorrow night. So do keep in mind though that it is only in the US. Unfortunately, myself, I had to order it, and then I am leaving it at my parents' place for 5 months until they finally come visit me in March here. So make sure that you guys grab that if you want. It again is limited. Very nice, very different material from your more typical merch stores. Very comfortable, washes very easily, dryer is all and all that fun stuff. So all that fun stuff. Again, you speak to a manager. So we'll let people come in for a little bit more, and then we'll get going on your guys' questions that you left us. We got a lot of questions that you guys were interested in when it comes to either traveling to Japan, living in Japan, studying Japanese. So I kind of condensed them all, took out obviously some of the ones that were on repeat, because we definitely got a few repeat ones, but a lot of them also have kind of side subjects that we can go over as we go forward. So but one thing I do actually want to ask you, Gresh, before we get into all the questions and everything, simply was, how was your trip down to the Kansai area? I know you went to like USJ and you saw some things in Osaka. Like, where did you go? Was it only Osaka? Did you go to Kobe, Kyoto? What were you checking out?
Yeah, it was only Osaka. So we were there. It was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weekends ago. I took off Friday. We left Thursday night, which is, we ended up getting there late because I worked Thursday. After work, we took the bullet train. So we actually went all the way to, I think, yeah, we went to Tokyo Station. So it's going all the way east, and then we took the bullet train from there to I think it was Osaka station is where we went to.
Yeah.
And then we had to take like 2 other trains to the hotel, which is the hotel was literally like right next to the entrance of Universal, so it was literally right there.
Oh wait, so did you get one of those? Because my girlfriend and I personally went to USJ back in May of this year, and so there, like, when you get off the train station and you go out the left or something like that, I believe, like, there are like tons of tall stores and everything, but there were also hotels right there. So is that where you stayed? Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly where we were. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. No. We saw some of that, and we kind of thought about potentially staying there ourselves because she wanted to get there at like 8 a.m. Right as the doors opened and everything like that. But we found a really good deal in Shinkobe actually, where we're one of the hotels you're staying at was like one of those tower hotels that was right next to the Shinkansen station, and like usually it would have been like $700 give or take, but because it was just right after Golden Week, we found this deal for like $300 off. Where it's like, yeah, we'll stay there. King size bed, breakfast included, dinner, the whole 9 yards. So
yeah, they were doing this campaign when I went, which was like welcome to Osaka or something like that.
Oh yeah.
And it was $100 off per night, and we were staying there for 3 nights. So we got that, and then we also got these coupons. I think it was 2 7,000 yen coupons that we could use at like any store there.
That's pretty good actually.
Yeah, so it ended up being really cheap, especially with the exchange rate. It was like, I think the total cost of just the hotel was like $400 or something for 3 nights, which is crazy.
Some people have asked a question about money, which we'll get into later, but dude, the exchange rate right now, holy crap. If you have US dollars right now.
I think it did go down a little yesterday, so we'll see if it keeps doing that, but yeah. Yeah, it's down to 138 now. So it looks like it's starting to
slowly come back up
a little bit. Yeah.
Oh.
I actually guess I could say this on stream.
Yep.
I took literally every single point of profit that I had from YouTube last year. I put it all into yen.
You put it all
right before the drop. So I'm waiting for it to even out. Usually it evens out like 100, and then I'm gonna put it all back into dollars.
Yeah, I guess that is a pretty good idea. It always depends on the just the rate obviously between the yen and the dollar, but right now, like, I've seen it's I don't know about you, because maybe it's just because I've been here longer and I've been here throughout the entire COVID, but seen so many now like tourists and everything, which is great for like the economy and seeing more people and everything. It's weird to see after 3 years of no one being able to come in essentially to the country, and it's just like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah.
So but it's kind of easy to catch certain people though. Oh crap, I'll go back to that. So I was just like, what the heck is going on? It's so weird seeing people right now.
Yeah, there were a lot of tourists in Universal when we were there.
Really? I would have thought more people would have been like inside the city of Osaka, like Shin Osaka, or not Shin Osaka, but like...
There were, yeah. Because the day after we went into Osaka, and there were a lot of foreigners there too.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I guess that does make sense, but at the same time, I was just like, man, what is going on? It's weird seeing things. But I bet though, probably when March comes around, I would not be surprised if like March and April we start to see a lot more, since tickets will probably be pretty cheap and everything when it comes to traveling. So
yeah.
Are you planning on traveling back to the States at all this upcoming year? Or are you just gonna be staying here?
Yeah, and I think I can't remember if it's July or September. My cousin's wedding.
Oh, okay. So next year, obviously.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm planning on going back in probably late July, early August. Probably late July, just to make sure I'm not part of the Obon, traffic of people trying to travel and everything. But gonna go back for like a couple weeks, finally visit family. So be a lot of fun. All right, I think we've been live for a good like 10 minutes or so. People are still pouring in, but why don't we go ahead and get started with the old questions here. So again, I sent you the Word document or the list of questions that I had made and everything. So guys, we're gonna go ahead and start answering your guys' questions that you guys asked us over on Twitter when it comes to what it's like being here in Japan, whether it's living, traveling, learning Japanese, you name it. So if your question hasn't been answered yet, or you potentially miss it, if you're watching this later, we're going to post this up on our YouTube channel as well. You can obviously look at we'll make little indents into the time bar and everything like that. Or again, ask us in the chat when we're all done, and we might have some time to answer the question over again. So, all right. First one that I simply want to just go over is somebody asked, what is the average day like in Japan, or how does it differ from your usual day before having moved here? So Gresh, I'll let you go ahead and take this one if you want first.
So I guess this is just going to be mostly about like my work situation, because my average day is working normally. So the big difference between me in the US and, well, I guess prior to moving here and then me here now, was when I was in the US, I was remotely working for literally 2 years straight. We didn't go into the office at all. It was 100%. I was working literally from my kitchen table. It was where I had my setup. I had my laptop, and then I had my 2 monitors. I had 3 screens for my work setup. And I worked that way for 2 years, ever since I think it was March 2020 when COVID started. Like that was the beginning of it.
February, March 2020. I remember that.
Yeah. And I remember because I worked out of, my office was actually I worked for a really big company, but the office I worked out of was pretty small. And so what they did was they like loaned us monitors and stuff that we could use at home. And everyone's like, all right, this is going to take like a month and we'll be back in the office, right? So that's what we thought. No, it did not take a month. So I ended up working, all of us ended up working from home for like 2 years, and not going into an office at all. And so the big difference between my normal day in when I used to live in New York City versus here is I go into the office pretty frequently here. So that's the biggest difference for me, is actually commuting to work and working in an office. But in terms of like a normal like weekend day, like there's not really much difference between here and the city, because Tokyo and New York are not that different. Like they're both major cities,
right?
But it's just, minor differences. That's really it. Not really that big of a difference, to be honest.
Right. Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. I guess I'm similar to you, where even once, like for maybe 2 months, I was work from home. And then it was right back into the office basically for work. And to this day, I still go into work every day. I commute and everything. One thing I did want to ask you though, before I continue on with my question, was just how long on average is your commute from, like, let's just say station to station for you?
It's about 45 to 50 minutes.
45. Yeah. Okay. So that's about the length of mine. Mine's like an hour and 5 minutes. Because I had to transfer onto to another train line, and then it's about a 5-minute walk from the station to my workplace. But
yeah, the good thing about my commute is it's one train all the way to like pretty much where I need to go, and it's like it's one transfer, but it's one station.
Right.
One to transfer once, so it's not that bad.
Okay, that's not too bad. Yeah, for me, so for anyone who maybe knows just the basic layout of Tokyo and everything, I actually live out on the west side of Tokyo, so like outside the city. It's about 20 minutes via the rapid commuter train in the morning for me to get into work, but the rent's like so much cheaper and everything. So that takes me about 25 minutes, give or take, and then I transfer over to one train line. But unfortunately, it's one of those awkward moments where when I get off my first train, the train I'm supposed to catch is already leaving. So I have to wait like with that awkward 5 minutes in between, and then I'll get onto that train, take it for another like 10-15 minutes, and then get off and then walk to work. So but yeah, for me personally, when it comes to just like an average, so not counting work, because obviously you wake up, you go to work, it's literally the same thing you'd always do. In terms of just an average like weekend or a day off or something like that, it's very just normal what I did back in the States and everything. I'll wake up, I'll either play some video games if I want to. If I am doing YouTube stuff or streaming, then I do that for either 5-9 or things like that. Or I'm just out with my girlfriend, we go out to lunch, or we just go shopping, especially because she just recently moved in with me. We've been going both good and bad for both of us, going a lot to either IKEA or to Nitori, trying to we get stuff set up, and then we're just like, oh right, we still need this, so we go out, we find it, then we find another thing that we potentially want, and we're just like, do we need this? Oh, it could work out pretty well. And then we like don't think about it for a bit, we come back, and then like the next day we're just like, okay, maybe that actually would have been really helpful and everything. So especially because she's not here right now, she's a little picky when it comes to colors, of certain things. Like in terms of like basic either furniture or setups or anything, it's pretty easy. But when it gets down to like more specifics, whether it's like like her coffee maker that she wants, it's always looking at colors and everything, and just, you know, she's very indecisive. She's like, I kind of want this. I'm like, just get it. Just, there's nothing wrong with spoiling yourself for a little bit. She's like, yeah, but the price and the colors not working. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm gonna let you do it, and just, you know, let her do that. So, but yeah, in terms of just an average day, you can make it as normal, quote unquote, normal as you want. Whatever you did back in your home country, you can easily do it here as well, for the most part, I believe. Or you can go out and, especially if you're newer to the country, you can explore the city. You can explore the areas that you're in and everything like that. So, yeah, it's. I think people have this image of Japan sometimes where it's just like, well, you're living there, okay, like what are you doing? Are you getting up, you know, you praying to the old Buddha temple or something like that every day, and you know, oh, you know, you got to wear those you know, kimonos or something. Everything. It's like, no, you wake up. Both Goresh and I, we have normal beds, we have kitchens, we have couches, you know, all that stuff. So it's pretty normal. Obviously, if you lived out in maybe more of the rural areas, depending on the type of house that you lived in or apartment, you might have more of like a tatami mat or something like that, which I don't know about you, Goresh. I personally don't like tatami mats. But,
I do like them, but
okay.
I don't have one in my house because mine's this apartment is, the whole area that we're both in are Montgomery's more Western.
Yeah,
areas.
it's more modern and everything, more Western. I don't know. I lived in an apartment with a tatami mat because the building was super old, but it was more renovated on the inside. I hated cleaning tatami. It got dirty so often. I was just like, I hate cleaning so much. So that's why I personally like it. So, all right, why don't we go ahead and go on to the next question here, and it is, was it worth moving to Japan? Now, obviously our answers are gonna be very different, but was it worth moving to Japan? Are there any general ups better where you came from? How about any downs compared to the original places that you both came from? So I'll go ahead and take this one first, since you took the last one first. So in terms of was it worth moving to Japan? For me personally, yes. Now, I have met a lot of people who have moved to Japan. They either moved to Japan with me when I originally moved here 8 years ago, or people who have either come into my work, or people I've simply just met over time, including Goresh, actually, because we met when he first visited here, or when he was visiting here one time. But for me personally, it was worth moving because when I visited here originally in high school, I had this goal of mine, maybe not necessarily to live here forever at first, but I had this goal that I wanted to try and live in Japan for a bit. So when I came to Japan originally back in 2014, it was, you know, something I was totally into. I knew kind of how the culture was. I knew the, you know, what to expect kind of. And so it wasn't as big of a like huge culture shock to me. We'll get into culture shock later. There's a question talking about it later, but overall, I personally think it was worth moving. It was exactly what I was expecting for the most part. There were still a few unexpected things, but overall, in terms of the general ups though, there definitely some ups personally. It was actually very easy to transfer from going from a college student straight into the working world. Essentially, I didn't have to really worry about job hunting too much at the very beginning. The program that I entered into was a government funded program here in Japan. So it definitely wasn't as, I think, chaotic and stressful as maybe a more regular job hunting, I would say, especially if you're trying to maybe go into maybe the private sector or a big company or something like that. So that definitely was a general up for me. And it was, aside from the Hanko, using the Hanko stamps for certain paperwork, overall, it wasn't too terrible to get set up in terms of a bank account, phone, address, all that stuff. It wasn't too terrible bad for me. The downs, I guess, would be that unfortunately we still use fax machines out here, so that was weird to get used to again. And then, you know, I think a very simple and easy one that a lot of people probably realize as well is just certain foods that you miss back in the States, at least where I'm from. Mexican food, man, I have been craving some good Mexican food. Gresh, I hope you had a lot before you came out here, because that's one of the few foods that I cannot find any good out here at all. So now there are obviously some other ups and downs depending on who you talk to. For example, I know if you're somebody who comes here and you potentially have a tattoo, definitely got to cover that up, especially if you're working, or if you maybe try to go to a public onsen, which is a public, you know, like one of the big baths or hot springs, essentially. Sometimes they don't let you in. They are becoming a little more lenient on it, but you still eventually sometimes find that, unfortunately. But in terms of just general ups and downs, that's kind of what I've personally experienced. What about you, Gresh? What have you personally experienced?
So I guess the question was it worth moving here? So far, yeah, I'm having a good time. I, again, like you, wanted to try moving here, and so far I don't really regret the decision at all. The general ups better than where I came from. I mean, it's just different. It's not better, or I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's just different. Different experience. Obviously, the work I'm doing is different. Again, most of my time spent like being awake is working,
Right.
whether it's doing an actual job or doing like YouTube stuff. Because I work a normal day, like 8-9 hours a day, and then I get off work and then I do YouTube stuff, and that's usually what my day consists of. Like I don't really have time for other stuff most of the time.
Right.
So it's not really going to change that much, but the downs compared to the original place. So yeah, I'm coming from New York City. So it's not really that big of a difference coming to Tokyo, like when you compare the two cities. But the one thing I will say, and I agree with you, is that the food here in Tokyo is really, really good. But the variety is definitely much less
Right.
than
Yeah.
where I come from in New York.
Yeah.
So there's some foods that I'm definitely not, experiencing here, but the food is still really good here. But I think I would give the edge to New York in terms of food.
I mean, I haven't been to New York since I was 2 years old or something like that. Like I was a little baby. But I mean, someone who lived on the West Coast for most of his life. There is Seattle, if for anyone who doesn't know where I'm from. There's a lot more variety. Funny enough, with Seattle, there's actually quite a few Japanese restaurants and everything. But again, you have more variety. Now that's not to say that Tokyo doesn't have variety. It's just that you have to search for it a lot more than you do maybe say in Seattle or New York, anything, right? Like you just open up Google Maps, you type in, whether it's Mexican restaurants, Thai restaurants, you name it, right? And 10,000 are going to pop up, exaggerating there a little bit. Whereas here in Tokyo, I mean, even in Tokyo, one of the biggest cities in the world, it's like, here's one like in Shinjuku, and then there's one way over here by Tokyo Station, which is, 25, 30-minute train ride, give or take, if you're not hitting any, traffic or anything when it comes to the train schedules sometimes. So, but yeah, no, I definitely 100% agree with that when it comes to that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and then the tattoo thing as well, I will say, because I actually did come to Japan with a friend once, and who did have a few tattoos, and we went to a few onsen. I think what we ended up doing is we ended up covering them with like bandages or something. I don't remember what we did, but we had to cover them.
Yeah, I think some people will get bandages and they'll either cover parts of it. It all depends on, I think, where the tattoo is. If you have a simple, tattoo on maybe like the underside of your arm or something like that, or it's more of a smaller one, like maybe on your ankle, those are pretty easy to hide, and I think for the most part you can get away with that. But if you're somebody who has maybe like a full arm tattoo or something like that, or maybe something that's really along the downside of your back or something, that's a lot harder to hide there. So
I think I imagine at this point there's probably onsens that will allow you to come in with tattoos, but you have to probably look in advance.
Yeah, I would definitely say for anyone traveling, because most onsens these days or hot springs have websites that you can check out, because most people will simply Google them and you find them and they'll have a website. So just check to make sure that they have, or they allow tattoos there, or if they don't. And that can kind of help you avoid any travel, headaches and everything like that. So, because generally when there's one hot spring, for the most part, where you go, there's generally others around in the same area. So if that one particular one doesn't allow it for it, then check the ones around, because as we said before, a lot of them are starting to understand that, when foreigners come or tourists come, some of them have tattoos, and it's not meant to be this like taboo thing against Japan or something like that. It's just simply, hey, I have a tattoo. Sorry, I want to take a nice hot bath though. So here you go. All right, moving on to the next question is, what is your favorite place to go, or what is a favorite thing to do in Japan? But that can be in Tokyo, Osaka, Fukuoka, Gresh. Where's your favorite place to go that you've either been as a student or visiting here, or where you've moved here?
There's a lot of places that I like.
I know this is definitely a harder one for me personally. Yeah.
I think if I had to choose one place, it probably would be Otaru in Hokkaido. I just like the city a lot. I think they probably have the best seafood out of any city in Japan that I've been to. I don't know, that like the weather is nice. Since it's Hokkaido, it's pretty like not unbearably hot in the summertime.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I don't know, the city's just cool. Like there's different like we stayed at a hotel there that was literally on like the top of like the mountain area.
Oh,
so it oversees
nice.
the ocean. There's onsen, like there's pretty much everything you could want there. While it's not too big and it's not like a giant city, they have a nice marketplace. Like there's a little bit of everything that you could want there. So I like, that's probably my favorite city that I've been to.
Okay, nice. For me personally, I have to narrow it down to two actually. I can't pick a favorite just because like you, there's so many cool places to go to. My first place I love going to, and this is one I recommend to a lot of people in terms of traveling if you get the chance, is going all the way west to Fukuoka. Fukuoka can be really nice in the spring. They have, in my personal opinion, it could be, it's obviously different for everybody. In my personal opinion, though, some of the best ramen in the entire country. And for a country that's really well known for its ramen, I love the ramen here in Tokyo or in Fukuoka. It is extremely good. You can get it heavy, you can get it light. You can get tons of toppings, you get as minimal toppings as you want, but the taste itself is just chef's kiss. It's absolutely amazing. So that's my first place. And then my second place is in just basic Sapporo, Hokkaido. Again, like Goresh stated before, Hokkaido has some of the best seafood you will ever have in your life, whether it's cooked or raw. Gotta try the sashimi though. As someone's family who doesn't particularly like raw seafood, and I'm the weird one whenever I go home to visit or when they come out to visit, definitely try sushi and try sashimi, which is just sushi without the rice essentially. It is extremely good, and Hokkaido always has it fresh. At least most of the places do. I mean, heck, even the airport, the basic airport in Hokkaido, has better seafood restaurants than probably the average area in Japan, in my personal opinion. So I definitely highly recommend it if you are coming out here during that time. And you can be kind of a 2-to-1 deal if you're somebody who loves to go skiing or even hiking in Hokkaido, because Hokkaido has a lot of forests and mountains and everything. And then, oh, by the way, you get like some of the best seafood in the world. So there you go, right there.
I'm not a big skier, but the skiing there is supposed to be very good.
I really wanted to go this year, but as you know, during winter vacation time is when everyone's literally trying to go. So my girlfriend and I are going to try and go next year. But we're gonna go to Nagano this year. But yeah,
they have good skiing in Nagano as well.
They do.
They had the Olympics there.
Yeah, they did. I don't
point.
remember exactly what year it was, but yes, they absolutely did. So, but we found a deal for like, I think it was like $1,000 in total, but it was 5 nights in a hotel, so 6 days, 5 nights, breakfast and dinner included, ski rentals, all-day passes, everything included. Like not just the hotel, like everything included. I was like, dude, that's a steal. Take it. So. It was a really good find. But yeah, definitely visit Hokkaido if you potentially can. Really cool place. So all right, going on to our next question then is kind of going off of what we just talked about, but what is the most beautiful place or site that you've ever been to or seen in Japan personally? For me personally, it was this year actually. It was back around late March, give or take. My girlfriend and I went a little bit more west, kind of towards Mount Fuji actually, not right up next to Mount Fuji, but kind of that area. And we went up into the mountains and we were kind of just doing a day hike. And some of the sakura flowers, the cherry blossom trees, were still in full bloom. So we were kind of hiking up this not too steep of a path, but we were going up this mountain. And you had these like petals kind of blowing, around. It's kind of like one of those like movie moments almost, like where the petals are blowing and you're like, whoa, someone should be shooting that camera with this or something. So the wind was slowly blowing some of the petals down onto the path and everything as we were walking up this little mountain. So that was definitely one of the most beautiful sights that I've personally ever seen. Just, I mean, in general, I think going anywhere where you can have sakura flowers and everything is really cool. Kind of a cliche answer, but they're popular for a reason. So what about you, man?
Yeah, there's a lot I could say. It's hard to narrow it down to one. I've seen just recently, like this past week, we saw the fall leaves in Yamanashi Prefecture.
Oh, very nice. Yeah.
I've seen the cherry blossoms. There was this one street that I saw that literally just like a almost like a driveway kind of thing, where there was just trees like running down the street, and it was a very long street. Just a million cherry blossoms running down. That was really nice to see as well. You could even say like a lot of the urban stuff, like in Tokyo at night, like go into like one of those very narrow streets and you look down the street like that. That actually looks really nice as well. I probably would give it to Mount Fuji. There's like, I don't remember how many lakes there are, but there's like 4 or 5 different lakes surrounding Mount Fuji.
Yep.
The main one is Kawaguchiko is the name of like I think the biggest one. They have like a bunch of tourist things to do there. But I remember having a very clear day of seeing Mount Fuji. This is, I think, I don't remember how many years ago this was. This was a few years ago. There's a very clear day of seeing Mount Fuji, and there's the lake there, and then there were just, you know, I don't know, just a lake and Mount Fuji next to each other. I think looks really good. That was probably the best scene that I've witnessed here.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I definitely really want to go to a lot of those lakes around Mount Fuji. We always see these deals for like the small town hotels and everything. You can go there, and there's a lot of like renting canoes potentially, or even if you're not around on those lakes, there's even like rivers around the area as well. And you can go like paddle boarding or even swimming if you want to. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. It's always those videos of those areas actually a lot of the times where, like, well, even on screen right now, like you potentially see something like this where you've got a waterfall potentially near the mountains that go obviously into the lakes and everything. So yeah, definitely a beautiful sight to behold. Personally recommend it. I know a lot of people who travel literally just to go to Mount Fuji to then first hike it, but then check out the towns and the lakes and the areas down below it. So definitely recommend it. So
yeah.
All right, so next question that we might have touched on a little bit is what is something that you do and you don't miss about the US after being in Japan? So we've both said, I think, that we both miss certain foods, especially me with Mexican food and everything. I seriously miss it. I make what I can, but in things that we don't miss, crime, yeah. Coming from Seattle and New York, yeah, I definitely understand that. I think one thing I personally don't miss as well is just how things just work here. Like, so I mean, whether it's the trains for the most part being on time, or how when things are said that they're going to get done or it's going to go this way, for the most part it happens that way. Whereas it's maybe a little bit more kind of loose, I would say, in the States, at least where I'm from. I don't know about New York, obviously, but at least in Seattle, that's the way it was sometimes. And just how clean it is, I would say. Like, you know, it's funny for a country that has very few or very little trash cans out in the, you know, the public streets and everything like that. It is so clean here, and I love it. And, you know, yeah, you occasionally have your smelly back alley roads, and especially in the cities and everything, but I personally just love how clean things are. Especially, you know, like if a train is at the end of its line, like everyone gets off, the people go through and they clean it, you know, whether it's spraying or wiping things down. They do more thorough ones if the train goes off the track. But yeah, that's personally something I personally really enjoy. So, and I don't miss it's.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely like crime, and then probably just general, like how nice people are. I feel like people are just nice here in general. Whereas in New York, it's like someone bumps into you and then they flip you off instead of saying sorry, stuff like that.
Now that doesn't mean that people don't really flip people off here, but you do.
No, I'm saying in New York, like when something like if someone bumps into you here, they'll like say sorry, but if someone in New York bumps into you, they'll probably just like flip you off instead of saying anything.
I think out of the 8 years I've lived here, I've only seen one person bump into somebody, and it was during the morning rush here in Tokyo, and the guy, you know, he literally like barged through the doors as it was closing, essentially, and he, you know, his backpack hit a few people, and this one guy said, you know, was the one older guy, you know, he must have been like 60 or something like that. He just turned around, I was like, "Oi, Korda!" I was like, "Oh, okay." So people actually did say that. it was one of those like anime-ish moments where I'm just like, nobody would ever say that, and the guy actually said it. I was like, "Oh, okay, guess he is pissed." So that was definitely something funny that I saw there. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. People here are just, for the most part, very nice. Now, obviously, I think, and we'll get into this is a later question down the road as well. There are obviously some people who are not as nice, or they definitely keep their feelings to themselves and everything like that. So, but I think overall, for the most part, people they're very welcoming. They're very nice. It's a lot of it is just people are very nervous when it comes to foreigners, simply because they think that we can't speak Japanese, and to be fair, there are a lot of people who visit who can't speak Japanese. So, and some of these people haven't used English in, 10 years since high school or something like that, right? So when they get a random foreigner or a tourist who just doesn't speak any Japanese, and you go full speed, hi, yeah, thank you, I'd like to order, this, and this, or hey, I'd like to pay for this, that's where they kind of back off and everything like that. So, one recommendation I would have for people is, speak a little slowly when it comes to visiting here, and everything, whether it's at a restaurant or anything like that. Use gestures if you don't speak any Japanese, pointing at things like that. That can help a lot. So, all right, moving on to the next one. I picked this one personally because there were definitely a lot of questions asking about what's it like working in Japan, not necessarily living in Japan, but working in Japan. Is how many hours do you work? I'm assuming per week is supposed to be the question. It simply says how many hours do you work? I hear Japanese people work a lot. Garesh, we obviously have different jobs, so I'll let you take this one first. So I would say not including YouTube at first, just in terms of your day job. How many hours do you work?
So I actually work in the same, I guess, umbrella company as I did in the US. So it's not really that big of a difference for me. The one thing though is that the work that I do is very seasonal. So right now it's not the busy season yet. It's coming up soon. So the typical day is just a normal, I think because in the US it's 9 to 5, right? That's typical. Right. That's how it usually is. Here it's 9:30 to 5:30. It's like the one difference I found. 9:30 to 5:30, and then you get like an hour break. So instead of 8 hours in the US, it's actually 7 here. Because you get the 1 hour break that is designated or whatever. Right. So that's what I'm doing here right now. It's pretty much just 9:30 to 5:30 every day. Nothing too crazy. But then once we get into busy season, I haven't actually experienced busy season here yet. But it's going to be probably around the same level as what I experienced in the US, which is can go anywhere from 12 hours a day to 17 hours a day. 7 days a week, including weekends.
Yeah, I remember.
So we'll see.
I remember every year where there was us talking or trying to get things done for YouTube or something like that. Be like, oh, yep, time to not see Garesh for like a month. And I'll be like, all right, see you next month, bro. So
yeah, we'll see how it is here. It's probably going to be a bit different just because, again, I haven't been commuting. I wasn't commuting at all to work. I was working home strictly in the US,
right?
Which definitely helped because I was able to at least save the commuting time to work on other YouTube stuff.
Right.
But for here, I mean, I'm not going in every day. I imagine for busy season, it'll probably be 3 days a week where we go into the office, which is not that bad. But still, it's going to be long hours.
Right. Okay. So for me personally, I obviously work a very different job from Garesh. I'm a high school teacher. I teach math and English for those who are asking. So for me personally, my official work time starts from 8 a.m. and I go until 3 p.m. So it's a little bit earlier than your kind of 9 or 9:30 starting time. But I do get off a little bit earlier. And for this year's schedule, what day is it? Wednesday, I actually get off at 2 because I don't have a 6th period class and I'm allowed to leave at that time. So that's a little bit nicer. Obviously, as you probably might expect from any teaching position in the world, you get paid less than a more corporate or company job. So, which, I accept, but it is nice having that extra time off or getting off earlier. So I'm generally, with train commutes and everything, I'm generally home by 5. In terms of a busy season, probably just finished it actually with October. Usually October is very busy and February can be pretty busy because it's near the school year here in Japan is from April until March of the following year. So February, especially for my third years who are seniors going to go into college, are extremely busy with tests for entering university and everything like that. So they're constantly asking you to stay behind to help them study or practice questions, because it's not just simply going and taking a test like it is in the States, where you have the ACTs or the SATs. You have to have interviews for a lot of these colleges that you enter into here, and a lot of them are very competitive to get into. The kids are constantly studying to make sure that they are really good. It's the common way of looking at getting into college here in Japan is it's hard to get into college, it's easy to graduate. Whereas in the States, I would say for the most part, it's easier to get in and it's harder to graduate depending on your degree and everything. So, but yeah, in terms of the hours though, that's generally what I work. Again, don't get paid as much, but I do like having the extra time because it does allow me to actually cook and things. And a lot of the extra time goes into 5ix9ine and YouTube and all that stuff. So, real quickly, I do want to actually get this chat question right here because I'm assuming it has to do with bullies at school and everything. Teachers for the most part are pretty on top of it. There is some bullying that you can clearly see. So if I'm generally not an authority person, I don't have that power per se, but there are some times where I will step in and I will call them out in class. And kids here in Japan, you know, for the most part, they listen, but they're still teenagers. You know, everyone remembers old teenage years. You know, we're all dicks back then. But if you call out their first name in class in front of all of their peers, just saying their first name, not even saying like stop doing it, just calling out their first name, they will stop immediately. So I've always kind of done that if I have seen any bullying. So, all right. So why don't we go ahead and move on to our next question here? This is getting into more of people asking about what it's like to speak Japanese, learning Japanese, all that kind of stuff. So, this is actually, I wouldn't personally call myself fluent. Gresh, you're very good at Japanese compared to me. But even as someone that speaks fluently for the most part, have you ever run into any language barriers, so to speak, when talking to native Japanese speakers? Any different dialects or anything you don't understand as well? I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, there's some work situations where I don't really know. Like, I'm still pretty new, and I would say that 95% plus of my daily work is in Japanese. Mostly, it's almost 100% Japanese with my work. But there's some times where like I'm emailing or on the phone with either a coworker or a client, and there's some things that I just don't know how to say because it's very technical. And I've never really had to use technical language before, like specifically for like what I do. Like I'm a tax accountant, right? So I never really had to say like, I don't really like amended return or like foreign tax credit. Yeah. Like some of those like very technical items, like I didn't really know how to say that when I first started. Obviously I've learned how to say those things now, but there are still a few things that will come up every now and then that I just don't know how to say. So there's some items like that are pretty difficult, but in terms of like just everyday conversation or even just like getting a lease for this apartment or stuff like that, like it was all pretty easy for me. But in terms of like work, like there are some instances like specific items that I just don't know how to say that come up every now and then. So that's really the only thing.
Yeah, for anyone who's wondering, you know, obviously you have your basic everyday conversation Japanese or speaking or writing and everything, but then you also have, again, like Goresh said, your more tech, you know, area of any, and this is any language, this isn't just Japanese, but then you also have business Japanese, which can get, you know, can be very different depending on the tone that you're using. And also when you get into super polite Japanese, which I hope I'm speaking for Goresh here, but I absolutely hate. It's called Keigo.
Everybody hates it.
Everyone hates Keigo. Everyone hates it. My girlfriend hates it. Everyone hates it. Like you just, anytime you have to speak it or use it, you're just like, sure. Yeah. So everyone hates it. So in terms of, for me, for anyone who doesn't know, Goresh is obviously much better at Japanese than me. He got his N2 certificate when it came to speaking Japanese, and
and then I don't have that. I never took a test.
Oh, you never took the test? Oh, okay.
No.
I thought maybe you took the test. Okay. So I personally have never done any of the N tests or anything because I'm terrible at studying. A lot of my Japanese was actually just simply picked up from, like, I studied 5 years in total, 2 years in high school, 3 years in college, but a lot of my Japanese actually picked up from just actually being at work. It's funny because even though I teach both math and Japanese, or math and English, people would simply think I just speak English the entire time. Not really. Most of the schools I went to, most of the people can't speak, good fluent English there, aside from maybe a couple of the teachers. So I actually taught myself to just understand Japanese, to speak more, just casual Japanese when it comes to a more I guess, casual work environment. Essentially, I definitely err on more of the casual side of my speaking sometimes. Like I even spoke to the principal sometimes very casually, or the principal, and some of the older teachers would look at me like, what did you just say to him? And be like, sorry, I can kind of get away with it because I'm a foreigner. So yeah, Gresh knows what I'm talking about there. But yeah, in terms of like general speaking, I've never really had any difficulty after, I'd say, about a couple years, especially when I lived down in the Kansai area and then moving up here. Occasionally some word is said very fast and aggressive. I'm sure you've had this happen to you, whether it's casual conversations or work conversations, where someone says a word like super fast, or like whether it's maybe potentially the dialect or something, and you're just like, wait, what did you say? So you simply ask them again, like, can you say it one more time real quick? I didn't quite hear you. In terms of dialects, I've never really personally had any trouble with dialects, aside from a few Kansai Ben words. Because
do you use Kansai Ben? Because I know you live there.
So when I lived there for 5 years, I had a thing with my high school students where in the classroom, for the most part, I spoke mostly English, but I did use some Japanese in there. But outside of the classroom, I had to deal with them. They spoke English to me, I spoke Japanese to them, and it allowed us to get just more on a more friendly terms and basis. But they would try to teach me Kansai Ben. I can't get that shit down at all. I don't know how it even came into existence. I'm like, what? Like, the only thing I've retained from Kansai Ben is just nanda yanen. That's it. That's all that's all I've been able to remember. Like, I'm sure when I was there, it's been 3 years since I moved away from there. You know, a lot of Japanese is also just something picked up from listening, right? Whether it's on the train or for me personally with my students and everything, just listening to them speak and being like, oh, that's what they're talking about, right? Or I'll ask them to clarify. But out of all of the Kansai Ben I ever heard during the 5 years that I lived there, that is the only phrase that I've nailed to keep, because I'm just like, I don't know, how the heck did you guys come up with this stuff? Like, and it's very simple words sometimes, where like you would simply say like, oh, wakarimashita, like, like, hey, I understand it, and then they just turn it into this completely different phase, and you're just like, what? How the heck does that match with this? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So
yeah, we went to see a stand-up show in Osaka when we went, and a lot of the people who were performing were speaking in Kansai Ben. And I was like, I can understand what they're saying. It's just different.
It's very different. It's very different. But it is funny though. Whenever I travel up to Morioka, more of the northern areas of Japan, sometimes where my cousin lives with his wife, she speaks a very different dialect up there compared to Tokyo or even Kansai and things like that. And so I introduced my girlfriend to them, obviously, and she's just like, yeah, sometimes I can't understand what your cousin's wife is saying, sometimes just due to the dialect and everything. I'm like, oh, sounds perfectly normal to me, but apparently there's some huge dialect difference between northern Japan and Tokyo and everything. And I have no problem understanding completely when people say something, but something about Kansai Ben, which is the dialect down to like the Osaka area, I'm just like, I got nothing half the time with that right there. So
yeah. There are some areas that have really strong dialects. I think Kyushu has some areas that are really hard.
Kyushu definitely can, yes.
So.
All right, why don't we go on in? Well, I'm actually going to go one question down off the list, and then we'll go back up to one, just because it kind of goes in with the language that we were talking about. So, how long did it take us to learn Japanese? Now, I think the quote unquote obvious answer for this one is simply, you never stop learning. You just never do. We will continue to learn Japanese until, either we stop using it completely or the day we die, essentially. So, but in terms of like maybe like classes and where you've kind of felt comfortable at the current levels that we're at, Goresh, how long would you say that you've taken us to learn, or for you to learn Japanese?
It's gonna be different for every person, I think. But I started. When did I actually start learning? I think it was 2000. God, it's gotta calculate this in my head. I think I started like 2009, 2010, something like that. Okay. When I officially started learning it, but I didn't really take it seriously at the beginning. It was kind of just like something I just was doing with some friends just for fun. It wasn't really like, okay, I'm gonna sit down and actually learn this.
Right.
I don't think it was until like 2012, 2013 when I actually started like actually taking it seriously and learning it like on a serious level. But in order to, I think, to get to a point where you're actually comfortable with having like a normal daily conversation with like an average person, it probably would take like at least a few years.
I agree.
Because there's a lot of steps to learning this, especially because it's of how different. Like for an American who speaks English, it's very like it's so much different than English. It's actually ridiculous. Like there's nothing in common at all. There's no commonalities at all. Like if you take French or Spanish or any of those other like Romance languages, there's a lot of differences, or sorry, there's a lot of similarities between those languages and English, and you can sort of just look at the word and kind of have a general idea of what it means. Like a lot of those words in Spanish where it's like the same thing as English, except you add like an IA at the end. Like, yeah, I think I know what that word means by looking at it. Whereas the Japanese, there's different alphabets, there's symbols that mean words by themselves. The grammar patterns are just completely flipped. Like the verbs come at the end of the sentence.
Yep.
There's literally nothing at all in common. And so the way I recommend for people to start learning this is at least the very, very basics of the language. I really recommend people either take a class or have a tutor, just for the beginning part. Because if you go into learning the language without having a decent, like a correct foundation of what you're learning, you can't really teach yourself how to learn it. But if you have somebody who's there to like help you at least learn the basics, then off of that, at least you can start learning it on your own and teaching yourself.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah. And again, like Gresh stated beforehand, everyone learns at different, lengths on how fast they learn it, how slow they potentially learn it. For me personally, I started learning at second year. No, high school has changed now in terms of the time. So 9th grade in the States was considered high school for me. So I started learning in 10th grade. So my second year of high school and into my third year of high school. And like you, it was the very, basics of how just grammar structures are, particles. God, I hate particles.
Yeah, that's I just assume that's the same thing, like same part of grammar, like that right. Plus like the sentence structure is just really different.
Yeah, how a basic sentence is structured, how you potentially read it sometimes. Obviously kanji is a very big one. Some people, are very easy or able to pick it up very easily. Others not so much. And obviously you have, like with any language, you have the reading, you have the writing of it, and you have the speaking of it. So you've got to be able to combine all of those together. I will say one thing, there are some people who look at something like katakana, which for the most part is a lot of what looks like Western words turned into Japanese. So for example, restaurant, right, gets turned into restauranto, or however, it is. And that can be a very dangerous way of trying to say like, oh, learning Japanese is easy. It's like, don't assume that just because it's a Western, quote unquote, Western word or something like that, that you can just put it into everything into katakana. So just keep that in mind when you are learning. But again, like I said, or like Gresh said, I would say your first year, if possible, try to have some kind of either private tutor or a class that you're potentially taking, whether it's at high school or university, or even some kind of like maybe a night class or even an online class. There's just tons of online classes where maybe it's once a week. You literally talk with somebody here in Japan and they can actually properly teach you the very basics and everything. And then from there, you can kind of take off on your own. I can say right now, without a doubt, that after the first 2 years when I was in university, after those first 2 years in high school, the first year in university was kind of it was a combination of a repeat course and also learning new stuff that I didn't get to learn in high school, because obviously high school classes are a lot slower. They don't teach you as much, whereas university's like go, because it was a minor for me. It wasn't my major, but it was my minor. So it was very go type of thing. And then the second year, unfortunately, was learning our old favorite Keigo, and I just wanted to punch myself in the face after learning that. And I was like, I am never going to use this in my life. And unfortunately, I've had to use it sometimes. But into the third year, though, I had a teacher who was very like A, by the books, but B, like super polite the entire time. And it was a reading. First, it was a reading class, and then it was a writing class on its own. And unfortunately, those classes, it was not the best in terms of like, how would you use Japanese in kind of like an everyday situation, whether it's asking to get an apartment or trying to order something or anything like that, right? So a lot of that actually, and this is what I highly recommend to everybody if you possibly can, I know it can be expensive sometimes, was just living here, right? Like I obviously have friends when I was down in Kansai and here as well, who speak fluent English from other countries, and I hang out with them obviously. But either being on your own or having Japanese friends or girlfriend or a boyfriend or anything like that really does make a difference sometimes when it comes to learning Japanese. A lot, for me, just listening constantly wherever I was, trying to repeat what I had heard sometimes, not just simply from anime or from a Japanese drama, but what my coworkers said, what my students would say sometimes, obviously checking to make sure I wasn't saying it wrong. But doing things like that and just being here and being, engulfed in it every day for a good chunk of time actually can really help. It's funny, one of my coworkers he's studying for the N2 right now, actually. His kanji and being able to look at kanji and sentences is 10 times better than mine. Just absolutely destroys me. But in terms of having a general conversation, I would actually say I'm a little bit better, and he's actually commented on it simply because for one, he's only been here for a few years, so I definitely have the time advantage on him, I would say. But second, just constantly listening and trying to repeat that myself and just take that in personally, the way I've gone about learning Japanese, has helped a lot with just kind of average daily conversations and talking with people and things like that. So it all definitely comes down to what type of learner are you? Are you somebody who learns better by speaking and by being with people? Are you somebody who learns better from reading a book, or doing any kind of online lessons where you just have a computer screen in front of you, you type in the kanji to practice it and everything, you look at the sentences and you memorize it? It all depends on what type of learner you are when it comes to the language. So, but I will say one thing that I definitely see a few questions always saying, like, how fast can I learn Japanese, or what's the fastest way to learn Japanese? There is no fast way to learn Japanese with any language, but especially with Japanese, there is no fast way. If you want to, it all depends on how much you want to use said Japanese. Are you looking to just be able to read basic manga? You don't need to learn as much, right? You learn hiragana, you learn katakana. Most of the manga books in Japanese, they have furigana on the side next to the kanji. You'll be able to read it just fine for the most part, right? And learn some basic sentence structures. If you want to travel here and you want to be here for a decent time, or even study abroad, you're going to need to learn more. You're going to need to learn sentence structures, grammars, particles, more kanji, things like that. And if you want to live here long term, even if you are an English teacher, English teachers get memed on, I think, for certain jobs here in Japan. But even if it's an English teacher, right? That's only at your work. You still have the rest of your life outside of your job, and you are going to need to know Japanese. It's going to help you a lot. Even if you live in Tokyo, a lot of my coworkers and friends that live here in Tokyo, even though they live in this place that's supposed to be very English and tourist friendly, it helps a lot when you know Japanese. So go, if you're in it for the short term, that's perfectly fine. That everyone's in it for different lengths. But if you're somebody who wants to either travel here, live here potentially for studying abroad, or live here long term, it's gonna take some time. It'll take some time to learn Japanese. So, anything else to add to that, Gresh, before we move on to the next question? Probably a lot of information we just dumped there.
This might actually be part of the next question, but I think I would agree with what you said. There's no fast way to learn it, but I think the best way to learn it and the most efficient way to learn it is just to have somebody that you could speak to just like on a regular basis.
Right.
That's, for me, was easily the reason why I became as good as I am right now. Yep. Is just because I had someone to speak to every day, right? Yep. And not even just speaking wise, like texting as well also helps a lot.
Yeah, especially these days, a lot of things are done over computers and texting and everything. So, and that doesn't have to simply just be for anyone asking in the chat potentially later. That doesn't just have to be a significant other or a partner or anything. That can be a friend, that can be a family member potentially, or if you have a family member here who lives in Japan who's married to someone who's Japanese. Like when I was out here after high school for 2 months visiting my cousin and his wife, I spoke English to my cousin, obviously, but his wife's very good at Japanese, but I pushed myself to say, I want to speak mostly Japanese with you. If I obviously don't know a word, or if I'm struggling with something, I will ask you in English because she's able to give me the answers. But if I forced myself to speak constant Japanese with her to improve what I had learned from high school, which in retrospect showed me that I didn't learn shit from high school. So they're like high school showed you this much, and then trying to talk to her expanded to this much in terms of all the stuff that I learned. So, or whether you're someone who studies abroad, it's not to say you can't be with your friends who potentially came from the same university or people that you meet from other countries. make more connections, meet new people, absolutely, but have those times to really delve deep into just only trying to speak Japanese. Like I had a friend who studied abroad for an entire year down in Osaka, and once a week she would force herself to speak nothing but Japanese for 2 days in a row, right? Obviously maybe talking to herself, or if her parents called or something like that, that's obviously out of her control, but for the most part she spoke Japanese wherever she went. She spoke Japanese. She only hung out with Japanese friends or Japanese colleagues or anything like that, and that's what she did, and it really helped her improve her Japanese and force her to do that. So an example. You know, obviously everyone does everything different, but that is an idea that potentially you guys could take going forward. So all right, why don't we go ahead and move on to the next question. We kind of already covered that second question there, actually. The next one is, are there any luxuries in America that are considered average in Japan, or vice versa? So either luxuries in Japan that are average in America. Luxury. So, I mean, a very odd, but also kind of obvious if you've been here is
I got one.
Oh, I got one. Go ahead.
You go first.
Okay.
You go first. I got one.
Okay. So for at least this is something that I have noticed, and when I've asked my friends who have, you know, who were born here and everything, pizza actually is considered a luxury here in Japan. The reason, and you guys have probably seen me tweet about this sometimes if you follow us over on Twitter, but sometimes you can see some really outrageous prices for certain goods and foods, especially something like pizza, because it's not considered a meal. It's actually kind of considered like a dessert or a thing that you eat to celebrate something, right? When people move to a new apartment or a house or something like that, they'll get friends, they come over, and you have like a quote unquote, you know, little party, and they'll bring pizza and everything. But things like that can get super expensive compared to the States and everything. So that's one luxury that it's considered a luxury in Japan. It's considered like quote unquote average over in the States. You know, I could make the very obvious one, I think, where if you flip it, it's average in Japan, but might be considered a luxury in the States, is a lot of just like social programs and trains and things like that, you know, things that we, you know, just aren't considered normal here, or even like the pension system or healthcare or anything like that. Like it's kind of like that kind of answer. But Crash, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say driver's licenses.
Oh yeah.
In the US, everybody has one, right? It's like a given, pretty much.
Yep.
But in Japan, it's very expensive, and it takes a long time to get one.
Yes. Yeah. So the driving age, I believe, here in Japan is 20, if I'm correct, right? It's either 18 or
I don't know.
It's either 18 or 20. I'll ask one of my students on Monday, but I'm pretty sure it's probably 20. But to give you guys an idea, though, for why it's considered a luxury here, is because, well, first off, not a lot of people have it sometimes, because sometimes you don't even need it. But for just to attend driving school, not to even get the license or buy your car or anything, but to get, you know, just driving school for an average of, I think, like 3 months or something like that. Gresh, you took driving school, I'm assuming, right?
Nope, I don't have my license because I lived in New York.
Okay, well,
never driven a car.
Okay, then I guess I'm going off of me. So chat, let us know how much it costs for you. But for driving school for me, when I was 15 and a half, I started driving school. There's a little program through my school that I took as well. It was about $300 to attend, and that was the driver's book that was doing all the practice driving, the classes once a week, things like that, right? It was $300 a week. After coming here to Japan and talking with people that I knew and all that stuff, turns out that driving school on average here in Japan is $3,000 to attend driving school. So you can see the quote unquote luxury there when it comes to something like that. So you have to pay $3,000 to attend driving school to get your license. And then depending on where you live, you might not even use it, especially if you live in like Tokyo or something like that, or Osaka or Kyoto or something. So that's a big difference. $300 in the States for just, you know, getting your classes, and that includes the written driving test and everything. The $3,000 here in Japan just to do driving school for almost half the time. So, by the way, I have to address this in the chat real quick. Opinion on pineapple on pizza. That is an atrocity, and you will never put pineapple on pizza. Get out of here, Jolly.
I don't think I've seen that here once, ever.
It's not really a thing here either way. But yeah, no. Pineapple on pizza is not a thing. Jolly, 5-minute timeout in the corner right now. All All right, so moving forward into our next question here. If you're so now we're getting into kind of like some trip questions here and everything. If you're planning a trip, what are some places that you would recommend to visit aside from your standard tourist stuff? So I will say before we give our answers and everything is obviously it depends on how long you're going to be here and everything. If you're only here for a week, you might unfortunately only be able to hit maybe one quote unquote non-tourist spot and then do more of the touristy spots. But if you're here for a lot longer, then that can definitely allow you to do less of the tourist stuff and more of, you know, stuff that we might recommend. So Gresh, what would you recommend for traveling if someone's planning a trip that's not your typical, hey, go to Tokyo, go to Yokohama, go to Kansai, you know? What would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend Hokkaido, but it's so out of the way that I don't even know if I would recommend it. If you guys want to also hit up like, you know, the typical stuff like Tokyo and stuff like that. But I'd probably recommend Hakone, which is like the onsen capital essentially of Japan. Like they have like probably the best onsen in the country.
Right.
And I believe it's hard to explain without showing you guys on a map, but there's Tokyo on the right, there's Kyoto on the left, and I think like in more on the side of, I think it's like in between the two cities and then south a little bit, that's where Hakone is.
Yes. Yeah, it's a little bit south, if I'm correctly myself.
Yeah. So I think if you guys are doing like the typical Tokyo Kyoto thing, you could probably like spend like a day or a day and a half or something like that in Hakone, and that'd probably be good enough. So that's what I'd recommend.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a good way, like, because what a lot of people will do when they travel here to Japan is they'll get the JR Rail Pass, which allows you to, obviously, depending on where you are, you can take a lot of the trains, which also include the bullet trains, which are super fast and really fun. By the way, take a bullet train; they're always fun to take. But I think if you can take a bullet train like almost halfway, get off at a more local station, and then go south a bit, if I remember correctly. And then you can kind of do like a day trip there. Then you can jump back up to the bullet train and then continue on to a quote unquote more touristy place. If I'm remembering my map correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, there will be tourists there too. It's not like it's going to be completely like non-mainstream, but it's less mainstream than like Tokyo or like Kyoto.
Absolutely. Yeah. In terms of a place I recommend two places personally myself. So some might consider this a touristy place, some don't. It depends because it is very far and out of the way compared to Tokyo and Kansai. But I would highly recommend Fukuoka again. But when you get into Fukuoka, like go outside of the city a little bit east, actually, there are a lot of really cool rivers and forests and lakes up in that area when you go a little bit east outside of the city, which are really nice because you are near the water, and there's a lot of local seafood restaurants as well. Fukuoka, I would personally say, is the second best place for seafood. Hokkaido's number one, so I'll be honest here. So I would highly recommend going there potentially if you can. And then in terms of the second place, it's in between Hiroshima and Kobe, actually. So it's definitely more west-ish area. I'm blanking on the name for some reason though. That's, if you know, Goresh, chime in. Map, I gotta check now.
I'm not very experienced with like Western Japan, so
Okay.
I'm not really even know.
let me check it out real quick. Hang on, I pulled up Google Maps real quick to see. Okay, Osaka, Hiroshima. Okayama. Go to Okayama if you can, because Okayama is actually near Kurashiki, which then you can actually take a bike if you want to, and you can bike across this bridge up to one of the across down south to one of the islands south of there, which is really, really nice. So, and for any of you Naruto fans, you can actually go a little bit east backwards again when you're on that island to a little area literally called Naruto. So if you are into that, then you can definitely go stay there and be like, look, I went to see Naruto. So but yeah, that entire area, being able to go biking across the bridges and everything is extremely fun. I think some actually really popular YouTubers who live here in Japan actually have done bike trips across that area and everything. So I would highly recommend going there if you potentially can. And obviously, like we said before, going to Tokyo, Yokohama are very easy options, but they're, if it's your first time, still highly recommend going. Or going down to Osaka, Kyoto, Kobe. Definitely go to Kobe if you potentially haven't already. Go to Hiroshima. Hiroshima is a really amazing place. Actually, surprisingly, Hiroshima has a lot of variety when it comes to The food in the restaurants there, actually, I found, which is really nice. My dad,
Hiroshima is one of the places I really want to go next. I've
Yeah.
never been there, and I want
highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And for and so in my family, my dad actually can't have gluten and he can't have dairy, actually, so very limited on the food that he can have. Hiroshima surprisingly had a lot of places that were either gluten-free, or we went to a lot of like Indian restaurants, because you could easily have Indian curry and everything like that. So yeah, it was actually very nice. But yeah, highly recommend Hiroshima. Again, we know it's more your quote unquote typical place that most tourists would go, but it is still kind of out of the way because there's no airport in Hiroshima that has international flights going in. The closest one is you have to go to Kansai, then you have to go up to Osaka, and then you have to take the bullet train all the way over to Hiroshima. So definitely recommend that stuff. All right, we'll go ahead and go on to our next question. We kind of briefly talked about it beforehand when it came to living in Japan, but how hard in this can be either studying abroad or living here, but how hard is it to get used to living in Japan, whether that's culture shock or anything like that? How hard is it to get used to living in Japan? I'm assuming by yourself, because most people come over here, they are moving over here by themselves. Was it a huge transition? Was it a bunch of culture shock, anything like that for you, Gresh, whether it was now or when you studied abroad here or anything like that?
It's gonna depend on the individual, because like me coming over here to live, like I'd already been here a bunch of times, so I don't really have that much issues with anything pretty much. But like my first ever time coming, like if you're coming over here for the first time ever and you're living here, that's gonna be tough. Yeah. I think it's gonna be pretty tough. Because I remember the first time I visited, this was 2012 or something like that. It was the first time I was, so literally 10 years ago, it was like the first time I ever came over here. And I didn't really speak the language that well. And it was pretty different. I didn't really know what to expect. Like I thought, I could at least converse with people on a okay basis, which was definitely not the case at all. I've learned pretty fast. But just, yeah, culturally, it's much different. I think they do things much differently here. You have to always conform to the way they're doing things. But yeah, if this is going to be like your first time ever coming here and you're moving here, you're going to have a tough time. So I would at least recommend that if you're doing that, you have somebody here that can help you, whether it's speaking the language or just culturally getting accustomed to things. Otherwise, it's going to be pretty tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. For me personally, when it came to moving over here and the troubles and everything, I had it a little bit easier, I think, than maybe your average person, simply because I entered through the government program known as the JET program, which is what a lot of people use just to get a chance to come over here, whether they're only here for a year or they live here for the rest of their life. But they helped me set up a lot of stuff, kind of more day-to-day stuff that I had to deal with. And I had been here twice already before I moved here. I had been here for 2 weeks as a school exchange program that I did in high school. And then after high school, I'd saved up money via a part-time job to stay out here for 2 months with my cousin, which was my quote unquote study abroad chance, because I could not study abroad during my university days, changing degrees and all that stuff. So in terms of just coming over here and what to expect, like it was perfectly fine for me. I will say though, going from a more travel only mode into a living, especially on your own, just diving headfirst into it, essentially, I did get some culture shock for a few days. I found myself, missing my family, my friends, and everything like that. It wasn't the areas I was missing, it was the people I was missing, right? So if you have connections and people that you are used to talking to on a daily basis, and then all of a sudden you're not able to talk to them as much, like for me personally, my best friend, he and I would chat every single day. Now we message, when it's morning my time and evening his time, but we can't really talk like this except for on the weekends when we hang out and play games and everything like that. So that was a little bit of a culture shock for me personally. I remember personally, I did cry a little bit because, it was a big change. It was going from only visiting and traveling and being carefree and all that stuff to, hey, you're living here, you're working. Like there was no kind of end goal in sight, right? Like when you travel, whether it's for 2 months or a couple weeks, your brain, the back of your brain knows that you are gonna go home to what is comfortable and what you've known forever, right? Like you're gonna get there eventually. Living though can be very different. It could be a year, it could be 2, it could be 20 years, right? Now, obviously, you can go back and travel to visit a home for a couple weeks if you want to. But in terms of like, this is your new home now, right? For however long you're going to be there, that can be a bit of a shocker sometimes. So just keep that in mind. But I do highly recommend it, whether you're only here for a year, whether it's studying abroad or living, is take the chance to travel. Traveling can change your life. Again, it doesn't have to be forever. It can be for a month, it can be for 2, it can be for a couple weeks, whatever. But getting out and exploring the world, whether it's Japan or other countries, getting out there, meeting new people, new cultures, the whole 9 yards, highly 100% recommend it. You will not be disappointed. So, all right, why don't we go ahead and go on to the next question here. So this is more of a touristy type of question for those asking, but how is it different living in Japan compared to being a tourist? We basically kind of touched on that quite a bit, but was there any extra things that you personally have found, Gresh? Because you definitely, I feel like, traveled a lot more here back and forth before you finally moved here. Is there anything that's different per se that you've experienced personally?
It's just much more realistic when you're living here. And by realistic, I mean like you're looking for an apartment, you're working, like you're living an like an actual life instead of just traveling and just, staying in a hotel and then going back to your, country, wherever you're from.
Right.
It's just, you have to, it's more of a professional life, I guess. I don't know. It's just everything you would expect is how it is pretty much. Like you're working and you're living and you're, doing what you normally would do on an everyday scale. So
no, I definitely agree with that. And this can be almost anywhere. You travel for 2 weeks, you get to see some cool stuff, and then you go home. Compared to when you move here, though, it's it's an everyday thing. When you wake up, it's not, hey, what time does my plane leave? It's, hey, I got to get up for work. I've got to catch my train. I've got to go do work. I've got to come home. I got to cook dinner, all that stuff, right? It's being an adult essentially. So that can definitely be a different thing. So I get the final follow-up question to that personally is based on here is someone asked, I've always wanted to go there. How would one start the process of moving there? Now, both you and I came over very differently in terms of the process that we took in terms of moving over here. So I've mentioned it a couple times already, but I entered through the JET program, which there are 2 main positions available through the JET program, which is a government funded program. You either become a teacher, basically teaching English. And it's not the same kind of English class you'd expect back in your home, the US or anything like that. It's teaching English as a second language, or you become what's called a CTR, if that's the correct term, I believe, where you have to have a high level of Japanese because you're working in a Japanese office, helping all of those teachers that are in your particular area, constantly using Japanese to go out to actually some companies and everything, to maybe set up programs with the schools to help your teachers and everything like that. So taxes, actually, surprisingly, I had my taxes done for the first 5 years until I moved here to Japan, where I now do my taxes by myself. So those are 2 positions through the government that are, I would say, the quote unquote easiest way to get over here. I would not recommend doing the late night teaching contract jobs where they're like, hey, we'll pay you like $2,000 a month or something like that to do these really late night classes, awkward hours, teaching both a combination of adults and elementary kids or kindergarten kids or something like that. Those can be very not good from what I've heard. I personally have never done them myself, but from every video and person I've talked to, they're not the greatest. So, but Gresh, what was the process of you being able to come over here?
So I came over here through my job. So it wasn't like I just all of a sudden decided to, out of nowhere, move here with no connections or anything like that. Like I did it through work. So it's going to be kind of difficult for me to like tell you how to do it if you're not somebody who like has a way in. I don't really know what that process would look like. I guess it would just be because the biggest thing would be getting a visa.
Right.
And I guess if you're moving here as a foreigner, that would be getting a job here before moving here, which would be probably very difficult. So That's probably the first step you have to think about, is getting a job here before moving here, which would then allow you to get a visa, which is what you need to come into the country anyway. So
Right.
yeah, I'm not really sure how you would do that, but some kind of headhunting firm could help like get you a job here, and then through that you could then get a visa, and then they'll let you come. I guess that's probably the best advice I could give, but I'm not really too sure.
One last thing I vaguely remember it. I think you sent it to me actually over line, was recently, if you have a degree and you can prove in a profession, in certain professions actually, it can make it easier sometimes coming over here when you try to apply for a job potentially. And that can also result in actually getting permanent residency faster than your typical 10 years. This is for people who potentially want to live here for very long term. If you have a profession that is needed here in Japan, and you see a bunch of job opportunities for it, and again, having that potential Japanese skill level as well, that can help a lot when it comes to trying to find a job over here. But as per usual though, connections are going to be a big thing sometimes, headhunting, all that stuff. So make sure your resume looks better than the person next to you, essentially. Best thing I can also advise. So all right, moving on to the next question is, do you think you'll ever come back to Japan? Now obviously we'll both visit Japan.
You mean the US?
Or the US, sorry. Do you think you'll ever come back to America? And obviously, trips aside, just visiting family or friends or anything like that, do you think you'll ever move back to the States, Goresh? I know it's a bit of a weird question for you because you literally just moved here, so it's just like, I have no idea. But if you had to take a guess, what would you say to that?
I would say yes. Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I don't see this being a permanent thing. I don't really know. I don't even know how long I'm going to be here, to be honest. But a few years at least. But I do think so. Yeah.
Okay. For me personally, in terms of going back to the States, I can't speak for maybe like when I'm retired or in my 50s or anything like that, but for the foreseeable future, I plan on living here. My girlfriend and I are currently saving up to actually buy a house here in Tokyo and everything. So, and we've talked a little bit about marriage already. It's not like we want to get married now and then everything else comes afterwards. We're trying to plan and have more security for our future first. And so for the foreseeable future, I'm planning to be here long term.
I think ideally for me, I'd have a house in the US and a house here.
Oh, that would definitely be the ideal situation. But with the housing market currently in the States right now, have fun buying that right now. I will stick with Japan's housing situation right now. It's nowhere near as bad. And the interest rates on some houses are definitely not as bad as in the States. So
yeah, you don't want to buy it right now.
All right, going on to the next question is, has your quality of life improved? Do you find yourself happier and more control of your happiness since living here in Japan?
I don't know if it's changed. I don't know if I would classify it as quality of life. I would just say that me wanting to live here and then finally doing that has made me happy intrinsically, but I don't know if like the everyday quality of life level has gone up or down.
Right. Yeah, I have to agree with that as well. I will say I am happier. It's honestly a really hard question because I wasn't like depressed or anything living in the States, and unfortunately for me is I don't have the experience like Goresh does of working and quote unquote being an adult in the States. Like the moment I finished college, I moved out here, so I know nothing else but living in Japan. Now obviously there are the horror stories that you hear or the crazy overworked hours and everything and the depression and stuff that you hear about in Japan, which a lot of that is true. And so it kind of depends on what you want, I would say, based on work and life and everything like that. But for me personally, I was willing to take a pay hit to have a more flexible schedule. And I think due to that flexible schedule, it's a lot better work-life balance for me personally. And I think also where I live personally, now neither Goresh or I live in the middle dead center of Tokyo, because Tokyo is obviously huge, right? But for me personally, when I say I live in Tokyo, I am on the actual border of Tokyo. Like
I go across the Tama River, which is west of the city, and then I still keep going west, and I'm in a more suburban area. Like I've taken some pictures and I posted them on Instagram and Twitter before, but my entire area around me is nothing but houses and kind of what you'd see in a more suburban like style in Western countries, or again here in Japan. There's no giant city buildings around me or anything like that. So there's a lot, and I'm really close to the mountains and the forest and everything. So I get a lot more fresh air, which I personally love myself. I would rather have a long commute, but have a more relaxed setting and area. So before that though, I did live actually literally in the center of city. Chris, you visited me actually the very first time we met down in the Osaki area, right? That was literally in the center of Tokyo for the most part. So compared to that to where I live now, 100 times better. So I would actually recommend, unless you're a city person, some people are huge city people and that's more power to them. But if you're somebody who likes to kind of have space away from work or space away from crowded areas and everything, I highly recommend living a little bit outside of the city area, potentially where you live, in a more suburban area. But that's just my personal opinion. So, but that I would say was a quote unquote, it's a much healthier lifestyle, I would say personally. All right, moving on to the next question. We only got a few more here. We've got about 5 or 6 left. So are there anything, so we've already answered things that we missed from the West and everything, but the next part to that was, is public transportation the norm over there? Is Japan just like what you expected or way different than what you expected when we first came over? You know, like obviously there's the typical stereotypes, I think, when people think Japan and that kind of stuff. So we'll go like this. So first, public transportation, Goresh, for you, and then because you actually had a lot of public transportation probably in New York. And then was Japan like just like you expected, or was it way different? I'll let you go ahead and take the question.
So yeah, public transportation is very normal in Tokyo. Again, it's actually very similar to New York, where I'm from, where not many people have cars, can drive. So most people take the train, a lot of people take bikes actually. But yeah, the train is mostly what people take. There's buses that run as well. People take those. Actually, when I commuted to work in New York, I mainly used a bus because it was literally just a straight line down to my office from where I was living, and it was like a 20-minute bus ride. It was very fast. It wasn't bad at all. But here, it's like I walk to the station and I take one train over to the eastern portion of Tokyo, and I'm at my office. So it's pretty easy. And then what was the other part of the question?
So when you first came to Japan, was it exactly as you expected, or was it completely different compared to what you?
So you're talking about like when I moved here.
They don't specify, but for me, I guess I would say whether it's moving or the very first time you came here, like, because we all learned about Japan obviously before coming here. So the things that you maybe saw on TV or on YouTube videos or things like that, and then you came here and you're like, oh, it's exactly what I expected, or whoa, this is completely different than what I thought it was. Like,
I wouldn't really say it was different than what I thought it was. I would probably say I didn't really know what to expect coming in, because if you watch TV or programs about Japan, like, you're not getting the full picture, and you're never going to get the full picture unless you're actually here. So there's a lot of things that you discover by being here that you just would not have known otherwise without being here. So that's something that I would keep in mind too. Like, you don't expect to come over here for the first time and like think you know everything that's gonna happen, because you definitely do not. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So the first part of the question, is public transportation the norm? Yes, absolutely. Obviously something like Tokyo, I don't know how many train lines and stations they have. They billion basically. But even for someone who lived down in the Kansai area near Kobe and Osaka, even public transportation there is extremely good. It's more, I would say Osaka is very similar to Tokyo on a smaller scale, where there's multiple different train lines and everything. But the moment you go outside of Osaka, whether it's going down to Kobe or going to Kyoto, the train lines are basically just straight train lines. They go straight basically. But there are multiple train lines going north and south. So you have like one train line that's more north. You have one that's in the middle, which was like the JR at the time. And then you have the one that's more south, which I believe was the Hankyu Henshin line. I don't remember what line is down there. It's been forever since I've been there. But again, it's the same thing, that they're always on time. Every 2 to 3 minutes, the next train's coming. So if you miss it, there are multiple different types of trains. You have the local train, which will stop at every station. You have rapid trains, which are called kaisoku trains. They will stop at every like 3 to 4 stations, depending on the area you're in. And then you have the Shinkaisoku, which will stop at like 2 stations and go to only the very most popular places. And those go super fast, right? Then you have your limited express trains, you have your bullet trains, you have tons of different trains. So it's the norm over here. You have buses, obviously. I personally don't like buses because I had to take one for 5 years where I lived, and I'm not for it anymore. I'll stick with my trains. I don't mind it. So, but yeah. And so then, in terms of what I expected Japan to be like when I first originally came here, compared to, or did I think it was completely different? It was eye-opening. Japan was the very first country I ever visited outside the States, and it's a joke in Seattle. Canada doesn't count. It doesn't. Going to Vancouver, Canada, it's the joke between the two cities, right? Vancouver says, Seattle's not a different country, and Seattle says the same thing about Vancouver. It's not a different country. So I'd been there tons of times, in the Whistler and all those places, but I'd never been outside. I've never flown on a 9-hour plane ride over the ocean to a new country. So for me, I kind of knew what to expect based on what Tokyo would look like, looking up at the lights and everything like that. But the moment you got off of the main, like Shibuya, Shinjuku area down into like more of the side roads and where the hotels are and everything, it was very different than what I expected, especially with the combination of having some of the, at least at that time, which was 2008, 2009 was the first time I came here. At that time, I was expecting, futuristic, tons of tech and everything like that, but it was more of a mix, right? Yes, there was tech there at that time. That was something you would never see in the States, but at the same time, there was also older stuff that you would be like, didn't we pass that like 10 years ago? So Japan is still and it's still even true to this day for the most part, it's still a mix of new and old. I mean, at my work, we still use fax machines, for crying out loud. I freaking hate those things. They're such a pain in the ass to use. It's like, just email it to me. I know why fax machines are still a thing, but it's a pain when your boss still wants to use them because he's like 65 years old and he refuses to change, right? So, there's that. But at the same time, with a combination of how some of the public transportation is, or some of the new buildings that are being built now, with how easy it is to go, to either shop for things or find things or anything like that, it's definitely, I'd say, steps ahead of the States and everything. So I will say one thing though, because we did talk about this public transportation, public Wi-Fi, not the greatest. Get a SIM card. Just gonna say that right now. Don't rely on public Wi-Fi. Get a SIM card. I don't know if you can attest to that, Koresh, but yeah, the public Wi-Fi.
I just bought a phone. Just bought a new phone.
Yeah, just get a SIM card, change it out, buy a new phone, whatever the case is. Just do not rely on public Wi-Fi. It's atrocious. It's not very good. So, this is kind of a short and simple answer that both of us can answer, probably no problem. Are prices for stuff higher or lower than in the US?
Well, right.
It's pretty
we
bad.
are in the middle of a very unprecedented exchange rate. So everything is way cheaper right now, but it actually has started going down the past few days. So we'll see how it evens out. But yeah, everything is like insanely cheaper here as compared to the US dollar. The US dollar, the rate. So for I guess, reference sake, the way it usually is it's usually hovering around 100 yen to the dollar. So usually when you look at a price here, you slash off 2 zeros, and that's what the dollar price typically is. That's how you usually convert it in your head.
With the decimal point.
Yeah. But the way it's been recently is it has gone up to as high as 150 yen to the dollar, which is actually ridiculous. I think the last time it hit that low was 1990. Like that was the last time it was that ridiculous. So everything is ridiculously cheap. I remember, again, I told the story earlier in the stream, but I went to Osaka 2 weeks ago to stay at a Universal Studios hotel, like literally right next to the park. And for a 3-night stay, like a pretty nice, like, hotel there, it was like $400 for 3 nights. It was a no-brainer. Yeah. So yeah, it's much cheaper right now.
If you're somebody who is coming from the States, especially, and you're traveling over here, you're gonna live like royalty for the most part. Like, so for example, like Gresh stated beforehand, when it comes to the yen to the dollar in a more normal situation, you simply slash off 2 zeros, move the decimal place over twice, and that's it, right? So like $100 is 10,000 Japanese yen, ichiman. So that's what would be considered normal. However, right now, if you took that $100 and you brought that over to Japan, if you tried comparing it to a perfect world, you would almost get the equivalent of like $250, but in yen, essentially, or something like that right now. So you are getting a lot for your US dollar right now. Now, if you're living over here, or you are, only have yen or something like that, it's absolutely terrible trying to go to some other countries, especially trying to go to the US right now. Like for me, because every now and then I send money over to my US account, like Goresh, we move money back and forth across the country and everything. But I simply sent over like $200 for an upcoming friend's birthday, right? Because it's a lot cheaper for me to simply send money than to try and find something here, package it up, and ship it off and everything, and have to deal with all that, right? It's much easier to say, like, to coordinate with friends and be like, hey, put this money towards that, and it can be from all of us essentially. But I lost so much money sending that money over. I was like, God damn it. It sucks right now. So coming over here, absolutely amazing. Out of Japan, sucks so badly right now. It's absolutely terrible. Always keep an eye on the exchange rate. All right. So we kind of answered this already. It has been overwhelming adjusting to living in a different culture. We've talked about that. Again, it all depends on the person. It's very different compared to being, if you're a traveler compared to someone who's living. So just keep in mind, it can be very different experiences. But I like this personal next question, just because it's something you'll have to deal with if you're here for more than a week. And what's your go-to haircut spot for where you guys live, or how have you guys dealt with haircuts and getting haircuts and everything? Because I mean, it's we laugh at it, but it's kind of like one of those common things you don't really think about until you get here and you're like, oh shit, I need a haircut. Like,
yeah, what would you do? This is the longest my hair has ever been. I actually have not gotten a single haircut since I've moved.
Okay, so oh damn, look at that mountain of hair. I'm jealous, man. I'm losing my hair. So for me personally, when I was living back down in Kobe, I had, this is where I kind of, connections or friends or coworkers that you can talk to and kind of asking them. That's actually what I recommend, is asking people what they would recommend. And it obviously depends on what you need for a haircut. Do you need a basic cut? Do you need perm? Do you need, do you have longer hair that's more sensitive and everything? You can find all of that here, no problem. But for where I lived back in Kansai, I went to just a kind of a local place that, the two people had lived over in France actually and studied how to cut hair and do all that stuff. And they had their little local place in the area that I lived in. So I simply went there. But it was only like $20 every time I went, but it was like full on, like, treatment and everything like that. Like, they would cut your hair, then they, shampoo it, conditioner, all that stuff. They give you a head massage sometimes. So you get quite a bit here. Tokyo is obviously more expensive. So I could go to, a very local place that's going to cost me like $10 to cut my hair. But I currently go to a place here in Tokyo called Queen's Ginza. Actually, it's mostly a salon, actually, for the most part. I'm pretty much the only foreigner that goes there. But it probably cost me about $30, $35 for a haircut. But again, that includes like an actual massage and all this other stuff. So it's a little bit more premium than anything, but I personally like it. And for anyone wondering or trying to improve their Japanese and everything like that, they speak basically no English there. The only reason I even go there is because the people I went to back in Kansai recommended me to go there because they had a friend there and everything. So he spoke very little English, but it's a great place to try your Japanese out and, practice it and learn it and everything, and just get to meet new people and everything.
I actually don't know the answer to this, but I heard that you have to make a reservation ahead of time to get your haircut. Is that true?
Where I go, you definitely have to. So I make a reservation. So I literally just got my haircut yesterday, actually. So I made a reservation for my next one in beginning of January. But yes, for the most part, you do have to make a reservation. Maybe those like kind of very small places that you simply just need a haircut, like where kids go and everything, you don't have to. But for the most part, you do need to make a reservation to have your haircut. So you'll want to go in, you'll want to talk to them, tell them what you want, make a reservation, and then go there on that day. So I can't speak for every single place, but yeah, a lot of places do require a reservation. So, all right, getting into the last few questions here, as we wrap things up is, we kind of talked about our jobs and everything that we do already, but just why, a simple question, why are we living in Japan? Why did we want to move here? What made us want to live here, essentially? We'll actually kind of, yeah, try and cut it down to that. Why did we live here? Or why did we want to move here?
I mean, it was always something I wanted to try. It's something that I think sets me apart, my language ability, than most other people in my field. So I think this would probably, you know, I've already experienced this a lot, but like going into like a client meeting and they see a white guy in the meeting, they're like, interesting. So it's like that kind of thing where it's like no one really expects a foreigner like me to be able to actually speak the language like this. And I think just in the job market and professionally, it's something that makes me unique and sets me apart from other people. And that's the main motivation that I had for doing this. But there's some other things as well. So,
okay. Yeah. For me personally, I had the chance to do a school exchange for 2 weeks here in Japan back when I was 17. And so every spring, the sister school here in Tokyo would come out go out to Seattle, and they could do homestays. We'd meet up with them, get to show them around and everything like that. And then every other summer, which that was the only downside of the trip, was coming out here in the summer. Oh God, Gresh knows exactly what I'm talking about. The summer's here.
Yeah, it's really hot.
It's really terrible. But so we got to come out here for 2 weeks. And so the first week was in Tokyo, and then the other week was kind of doing the more touristy thing where we took the bullet trains down to Hiroshima, Osaka, Kyoto, and those areas. But I actually got to meet my cousin, who I'd never met at the time, and his wife that I mentioned beforehand. They came down to Tokyo and they showed me around for the day instead of going to, I think the rest of the group went to like Akihabara and a couple other big touristy areas. I went around and just explored Tokyo for a day with them. And they offered me the chance to come back to Japan for 2 months to stay with them up in northern Japan, kind of as a mini study abroad. And I said, sure, I'll save some money up during my part-time job in high school and I'll come visit you guys. And it was basically like living out there. I was simply in their apartment. We cooked. I went to my cousin's job with him sometimes. I got to meet a bunch of people, went out and traveled and everything. I went to go visit his wife's family, actually, in kind of western northern Japan, which was really cool. They didn't speak a shred of English. I mean, again, that was a great opportunity, though, to expand my Japanese and show that high school didn't teach me jack shit. But it was from that moment that I started asking my cousin, I'm like, you've lived here for 20 years now at that time. How did you get over here? What's it like living here? Would you recommend it? And he says, I actually kind of would recommend it, even if it's only for a year. And it was from that moment, it kind of just sparked something to me. I was like, you know what? Kind of like Gresh, I want to try it. I want to see what it's like to live here and everything. So when I came out here after university, I thought, okay, I'm going to go for the 3-year contract, because the contract that I came on was for 3 years. And if I wanted to extend it for an extra 2, I could, but 5 was the max. So I said, okay, let me try 3 years and see where I land. And 3 years came up like that. And I was just like, I want to keep living here. So I stayed for another 2 years, and I was like, I still want to keep living here. And so I moved up to Tokyo for more job opportunities. Job hunting was a pain in the ass back in Osaka and Kansai, but and when I moved where I currently am right now, and I still don't hate it. It's not perfect. I think I speak for both Gresh and I when I say Japan is not a perfect country. There are easily things that are wrong and things that we don't like and that piss us off and everything, but the positives as of right now outweigh the negatives for us. And for me personally, I just enjoy living here. You know, it probably does help that I do have a significant other that I currently now live with and everything, but you know, that has, you know, there's been no downsides to it. So it feels like a pretty normal life, what I would almost live back in the States, with some changes and speaking a different language and everything. But for the most part, I still really enjoy it. So I don't have any plans on moving back. And like I said, I think Gresh also enjoys currently living here right now. So things can change, but for the most part. So, but yeah, I think for the most part, that's basically all of the questions that we had. Again, the last one here was simply how difficult was it moving and adapting, but we feel like we've answered that probably 10,000 times now. So, If there's any last minute questions in the chat that you guys want to ask us before we probably wrap up the stream, we've been live for almost 2 hours now. So it's almost 1 p.m. here in Japan, actually. So I have to remember that daylight savings time. So
yeah, it's now 14 hours between here and New York.
Yeah,
and I think for California, what is it, 17
hours? Yep, 17 hours trying to contact my family. Sometimes I'm like, God, I have to remember that. So I don't mind it, for at least for me. I don't know about for New York and everything, but for me, between October to April, I actually like it right now because like it can be 1 p.m. right now here almost in Japan, but it's only 8 p.m. back in the States. So if I had to call my family up or something like that, it's actually a lot easier. Whereas if it was before October, it would almost be 9 going on 10 p.m., being over there right now. So that can be a bit of a thing. So, okay. So I honestly thought I would see this question in the Twitter, but I do see it in the chat right now is it easy to rent as a foreigner? So that is probably going to apartments and everything. So yeah, finding an apartment here in Japan can be a very tricky situation, I will say, depending on your Japanese level, how long you've lived here, where you're trying to live. It can get pretty hectic and crazy sometimes, and sometimes just straight out I don't know the word I'm looking for, but they will look at you and be like, oh, you're a foreigner? No. Like, they literally will deny you just for being a foreigner. It doesn't matter how good your Japanese is, how much money you make, how long you've lived there, showing that you pay taxes and everything. They will straight up say no. I actually had before the current place that I live in right now, there was one place before this that I was looking at that I really liked. And we called so there was an agency helping me, and we called up the owner of it, and it was this father-daughter owned little business or something like that. And the daughter answered the phone, and she said, yeah, no, we have no problem. He's been here for a long time. He's not, your crazy college student looking to throw parties and everything like that. He speaks Japanese, obviously, and I talked to her a little bit in between that. And she said, let me just go ask my father real quick. And apparently the father had been sitting there, and I don't know if she had it on speakerphone or voice echoed or whatever, but the father was right behind her, and I don't want to say yelled, but that's the word I'm going to use. He yelled so loud that it went through her phone, out of the agency's phone, the guy that was helping me with this. And I heard it where he basically, this isn't the cleanest translation, but basically said, I'm not going to have a dirty foreigner living in my apartment. And that was that. So hadn't even talked to me. His daughter was okay with it. And it wasn't like I was in the same apartment building or anything like that. Like, it was just a random apartment that they owned in another area. And he basically said, I don't want no dirty foreigner in my apartment. And I was like, okay, well, moving on. So it's obviously gotten better compared to like 30 years ago. I have coworkers who have been here for a long time, and they tell me the horror stories that they've experienced. But you will experience that sometimes. You will. It's actually easier to buy a house here in Japan than it is to rent an apartment, which still blows my mind to this day. But Goresh, what about you? Have you had any experiences, whether it was in college when you studied abroad here or getting your current place right now? Have you had any hiccups or anything like that? So
well, when I was studying abroad, I lived in a dorm, so I didn't really have any and I didn't really experience like the renting situation until I moved here like recently. But I mean, I've used a website. It's called Sumo to find an apartment.
Sumo. Yeah, that's what I use for looking for places and everything.
Yeah. And it was pretty easy. I mean, the one thing to remember here is that if you want a pet, and that's one of the things that we were looking for as well, it severely limits the availability of apartments that you could rent, because it comes down to the building that will let you rent or will let you have a pet. And then if they do let you have a pet, especially in the Tokyo area, it'll probably only be limited to like a small pet. They are sectioned off by sizes as small, medium, and large pets. So we found a building that will let us have a small pet, and that's one of the conditions we put in. Basically what you do is you can search for a different apartment size, and then you can put in different conditions. So like, okay, does it let you have pets? Is there how far is it from the station? Like what kind of stove does it have? Is there a balcony? Like all these different types of conditions you can put in, and that will obviously limit the amount of apartments that it shows to you. So that's, I think the best way to do that is you use the website, and then through there it'll give you a contact number, and you can call whatever agency is handling the apartment, and then you talk to them and figure out things from there. So,
and one thing you have to look out for as well is when you're searching, through these websites and everything, just for looking for places first before you're even contacting them, they give you a lot of options in terms of what you're looking for, like what's your price range, is your building facing north, south, air conditioned, all that stuff, right? But two things that they have on there as well, which I personally want to chuck through a window and destroy, is key money and gift money. And you can select these to say, I don't mind paying it, or no, I don't want to pay this. But when you're searching, depending on the area and the price range that you're putting in, if you select no key money and no gift money, you'll see, like, for example, 300 options are given to you, right? Like, let's say you put in your price range, the size, how long from the station, and all that stuff, right? And you click search and it gives you 300 options or something like that. And then you select, oh wait, sorry, I don't want key money and I don't want to pay for gift money. That search option of 300 will go down to like 10. And I'm not even joking. Like, that can happen. So it is expensive to move here. In terms of an apartment and everything like that. So make sure that you are that you like the area you are moving into, and make sure that you are ready to pay like 3 months, 4 months of rent or something like that just to move in, depending on where you are and everything. There are obviously much cheaper places and everything like that, depending on where you go. There are places that don't have the key money and the gift money and everything like that, and it's actually not too terrible to move in, but it all depends on the area you're going to be in. So just be prepared for that, though, is what I would say. So but yeah, so rent can be a bit of a headache sometimes. But yeah. So hey, Talon, is your wife Japanese? I'm not married, dude. I'm not married. I have a girlfriend right now. We're not going to get married probably for another couple of years, so because we're saving up for a house right now. So all right, if anyone's got any last minute questions, we'll be free to answer them, but otherwise I think that's about it, unless, Gresh, there's anything else that you would recommend in terms of people traveling here, living here, learning the language, thing that we actually haven't said.
In terms of traveling here, I guess I would say probably, I would imagine the next like 6 months or so is going to be very busy for traveling, just because the country was basically unavailable for the past 2 years. So I imagine there's going to be a flood of people coming in, right? So it might be a little bit difficult if you're somebody who wants to come over here. I don't know how what the situation is going to be like, but I imagine that like everybody who's wanting to come for the past 2 years is finally now able to come. So there's going to be a lot of people that wanted to come and flooding in, So I don't know if it's going to make the prices jacked up or whatever, but you might want to wait a little bit before you decide to come over if that's something that you're thinking about doing. But other than that, it's definitely worth coming over here and experiencing.
Yeah, I would definitely say in terms of the traveling, try not to come over like when your quote unquote typical time is, Christmas, things like that. Try to come in, like, I would say the best time to come over is March, is what I would personally say is the best time to come over if you can make it work. Great weather, lots of stuff going on. It's a lot of cheap stuff that you can find, no problem. Not crazy, tourist or even locals traveling and everything like that. You can get some good prices and everything, is what I would personally recommend for that. And one thing I will also say real quick for anyone traveling, at least this may not be the case in a year or something like that, but for right now, when you travel over here, you don't need to wear a mask when you're outside, but a lot of restaurants and buildings will still ask you to wear a mask. So, respect that, because police here sometimes they will arrest first and ask questions later sometimes. So depending on how much of a fuss you make. So, one last question I see in the chat real quick before we head out here is, how is the language barrier if you know no Japanese?
Very high.
Very high. Very high. I would recommend learning some. Now, if you're simply traveling, maybe for like a few days, like maybe you're doing multiple countries, or even if it's just Japan and you're only going to Tokyo, Yokohama, and let's say Hiroshima, you can get by with no Japanese, but it's still going to be a challenge. So I would recommend brushing up on some basics, even if it's something simple like hello, I would like to order this, or excuse me, where is insert thing here, essentially, right? Because there is a big barrier. People think that everyone here can speak fluent English and everything sometimes. Yeah, especially when they don't use it for a long time. especially these last 3
Yeah,
years.
I was gonna say that's probably the one thing that people don't realize is like Japan is what the world's 3rd largest economy now.
Something like that.
You would expect the average person to be able to speak English. That is certainly not the case at all.
I mean, I still get stares. I don't know about you, that I still get stares when I walk into a store or a restaurant and they say, they look at me like, oh crap, a foreigner's walking in, crap, what's the English? And I speak just in Japanese. I'm like, excuse me, can I have, a table for 2 people or something like that? And they look at me like, oh, this is this huge sigh of relief. There's like, oh yes, let me take you this way. So, I'm assuming you've probably ran into that, whether it's for work or for anything like that. There's like, oh God, foreigner. And then you speak Japanese and you're just like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's definitely happened before.
And again, if you're looking for someone, or if you're someone who's looking to potentially live here for a while, just remember, try to find a job before you move out here, and getting the visa are the 2 big things. And then have somebody out here who that you know or can help you with the culture in terms of like phones and getting things set up, gas and all that sort of stuff. After you get through that, it becomes a lot easier. But knowing Japanese can help you a lot. It really can. Again, you don't need to be fluent. You're gonna mess up. I mess up on a daily basis. I've been here for 8+ years. I'm sure Gresh, he's made mistakes himself when you try to speak something. That's just the case. Better to make mistakes and keep learning than to not try and learn at all. So, all right, guys. So I think that's going to be it for the live stream, though. We've been live for about 2 hours, give or take. So again, if you have not seen the merch, I know I just posted it in the chat, so I'll post it again in case someone literally just coming in. But we have limited time merch right now available through this link right now. It's only available until tomorrow night, so get it while you can. The material is actually really nice, really comfy and everything like that. We've been posting it on social media, Instagram, the whole 9 yards. So make sure you go ahead and buy it if you want to get some awesome merch. Makes a good Christmas present if you want to, or even a present for yourself. So highly recommend it. And Gresh, any final closing thoughts before we head out?
No, that's it. I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to.
Okay, cool. So then, with that being said, everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this live stream. It was a lot of fun chatting with you guys. Gresh, always a pleasure to have you here as always. And we'll see you guys very soon. I'm sure we'll probably have a Pokemon stream coming up in the near future with Scarlet and Violet. I'm sure Gresh wants to try and get some shiny that he's not gonna be able to get for who knows how long. Don't worry, dude. It'll be, you won't get it first, and then some ROM will come out later, and then you'll get it just like your sweet.
Yeah.
So anyway, guys, I've been telling with 5-9 Direct, joined with Garesh from 5-9 as always. And until next time, everyone, we'll see you guys in the next one. Johnny.